Hey, everybody. How's it going? My name is Ron Sparkman, and I am the Chief Curiosity Correspondent for the Space Foundation Discovery Center. And today on Space4U Live, we have a very special guest to talk about all things Hubble. It's the 30th anniversary, so we have Bethany Downer. She is a Hubble ESA Public Information Officer. She's also a TEDx speaker, prolific science communicator, if I can speak, and Possum astronaut candidate. So, Bethany, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know you just had a busy week, so I'm so glad that we got you so quickly.
No, I'm delighted. This is the fun part now to talk about all the busyness last week. So I'm grateful that you got in touch.
Me too. So let's kind of kick it off with my favorite question to ask everybody to start off. When did you first discover this love for space and science that you have?
Absolutely. When I give my normal spiel to kids when I'm doing outreach, I'll normally tell them if you can picture a notebook that you write your notes on in school. They have the lined pages, but there's usually some open space at the top or the bottom. I used to, even as early as elementary school, I used to write down what subjects that I learned about every day fascinated me most. And I would look back sometimes at the end of the year as to what subjects really drew my attention and interest. And I realized the older I got that they were all related to space in some way, but also that space encompasses just about every discipline. So I knew I wanted to work in space in some regard. I did not know how. I started trying with engineering at first, hated it within 2 weeks of starting my engineering program. I switched out and ended up finding a love for geography and essentially doing earth sciences before transitioning more into space science then for my master's. And really found a niche, I guess, for communicating that. I have a love for space, and it's important to me that other people understand it, because I think sometimes its value for our life here on Earth isn't always communicated enough for people to not only understand but to value it. So I think that's why I came to fall in love for the communicating and outreach aspect for space.
And so you have an interesting background. You something that you really loved when you were younger was swimming, and a diver, I believe, right? So
I started in diving, and that actually transitioned into synchronized swimming. So I did that for several years, which is, I mean, very closely related to astronautics, in fact. And it was a passion for a long time of mine, and it ended up being something from a physical standpoint that's quite related to astronautics. You're absolutely right.
And so that also led to, while we're on the topic of astronautics, perfect segue. So you were the first Possum astronaut candidate, scientist astronaut candidate in Newfoundland, which was, I saw that in something when I was doing the Google. And so that's a really cool thing. And you're really heavily involved in Possum. And we've been really fortunate to have a lot of people in the show that are part of it, and including myself, the host. So can you tell us a little bit about your work with it as well as Possum 13?
Absolutely. So a bit of a backstory, and it's not even related to space at all, but it's amazing how the story has come to be almost a step into everything that I'm doing, including Possum. While I was doing my undergraduate studies here in Newfoundland, I had the pleasure of meeting Chris Hadfield at a conference in Ontario. And I was fortunate to have a few minutes alone with him and to convey how serious I was about astronautics in general. But I told him that I felt discouraged because, Atlantic Canada has not had an astronaut yet. I don't feel that there were means for me to become one. And the piece of advice he gave me was to first make a name for myself, whether it's space or not, just get my name out there in a positive way, and just, at least get it out there that this is what you want to do, but start, doing something for your community. And I started a nonprofit to collect unwanted shoes. In general, in North America, I think we overpurchase shoes, women in particular. So this nonprofit sought to collect shoes that were not wanted and to distribute them to those in need. And the original goal was 100 shoes, but after the first week, we had 1,000. So my poor family had to deal with thousands of shoes going in and out of the doors, and it completely exploded. We had offices open across Canada. It was provincially incorporated, but grew so big it became federally incorporated as a nonprofit. Hundreds of volunteers across the country. The shoes were distributed to, I think in total it was 17 countries around the world. Tens of thousands of shoes that got redistributed. But it did exactly what Chris Hadfield suggested, was to put my name out there, even though it had nothing to do with space. I was originally the shoe girl before the space girl. And so it at least put the name out there, so that when I was applying for master's programs or things like Possum, outside from the passion for space, I had a really strong experience of leading something internationally, but hopefully to demonstrate that I had the initiative to take something on and to say when I'm going to do something, I'm going to follow through. And Possum has just been fantastic ever since I've gotten involved. The first ground school was wonderful. The aerobatic flights are still one of the most favorite things I've ever done. I can't wait to do more of them. The geology field school out in the volcanic flats, where we got to replicate some of the experiments rather in the same places where the Apollo astronauts trained. It's all been stupendous so far, and it's led me to get to know other people. For example, Uli, I'm hoping to do an expedition with her on Kilimanjaro, whether this year or next year. It's just opened up so many doors, and including opportunities, and the steps are moving in the right direction towards a suborbital flight for me within the coming years. Definitely within the next decade. I'm hoping it's within the next 5-6 years, but it's all been a series of steps into, going towards a greater goal. So Possum's been a great part of that. And that includes Possum 13. Like you said, it's those of us who are strong ambassadors for young women who want to achieve more in the aerospace industry. And I love that I come from an area where there is no space industry. Atlantic Canada in general, there's not. Canada, of course, is very developed, very highly educated, but there's clusters in terms of where your opportunities are for the high-tech, high-science-focused areas. So I unfortunately now live and work in Europe for the most part, so I had to leave where I'm from in order to achieve what it is I wanted for professionally. So it's important that I find ways of developing access to these opportunities for those who also want to achieve careers in space. So that's something that I'm trying to bring back home. And Possum's been a fantastic tool for that, as has Possum 13 and in many ways. Throughout the past couple of years, I've done a lot of outreach throughout Newfoundland. I've had the pleasure of speaking to about 10,000 kids thus far, explain to them what it is I'm doing and what I want to do. And Possum 13, in the end, it creates such a family as well. When you have a group of women that are all working towards changing the status quo, it can be quite inspiring, because sometimes at the end of a hard work day, when you've experienced sexism or things that are discouraging, even to go through a group chat with other women that are all encouraging each other can really turn your mindset around. So all in all, it's been a fantastic to be involved in that organization in various capacities.
And I can't echo that enough. And then, this is coming, obviously from a man, but it was really exciting for me to work with Possum 13 on the social media side of that. I learned a lot of things, started seeing the world in a lot of different ways, and I know that I definitely grew from it. And Possum as an overall organization is incredible, and I'm really fortunate to be a part of it as well. So just so everybody knows, this is open to questions. If you guys want to talk to us about anything, ask anything of Bethany and all the great work that she does, please feel free to do that. But let's dive into your love and passion and talent for communications. And this started kind of early in your career with an internship at ESA. So can you kind of tell us how that happened? And maybe for those who don't know what ESA is.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was studying at the International Space University in France, and the time came, we were all applying for work terms. I was deciding between applying for NASA and the European Space Agency. And I'm a Canadian, so I also had to think of where I could do the most good and have the most prosperity professionally moving on after my master's. And for those who may not be aware, the European Space Agency consists of 24 European member states, but Canada is also an associate member. So there are Canadian staff, there are Canadians can bid for contracts, Canadian organizations. So the Canadian Space Agency, of course, works very closely with NASA on many of its missions and projects, but it also works very closely with the European Space Agency as an associate member. So that was one of the reasons I was drawn to ESA, because of my nationality. I knew I could likely see some prosperity there, but I was also drawn to the European Space Agency because it is unique in the fact that it is representing over 24 countries. This also means it's representing space in all aspects to many different organizations. It's covering all areas of space just as much as NASA, just as much as the other big space governmental organizations. But it's fascinating to me that they're effectively communicating to so many languages, to so many cultures. And I think that's something that really drew me to it from a communication standpoint. So when I was first applying to the internships, I knew I was looking for something communications, education, outreach. It kind of caught my attention. But this was the internship that really gave me my first experience in that. I had the pleasure of working closely with the UK astronaut Tim Peake throughout the summer. And even things like attending events with him or watching how he engages with young people as they come to ask him questions was a great eye-opening experience in terms of what's required not only as an ambassador, but also as a communicator. And I think it really set in stone the fact that this is what I wanted to do, is to be an effective communicator for space. I had the pleasure of running into Bill Nye at an IAC, International Astronautical Congress, back in Australia a few years ago. And in the elevator, in classic elevator pitch terms, he asked me what I wanted to do, and I said, I want to be like a female version for you, but for space. Everyone growing up who taught me and told me about space were men, and I really wanted to find means of bringing female ambassadors and communicators to the greater public. And so with time, I thought, why can't that be me? And so it started with just becoming a communicator and practicing it. I would take scientific articles and I divide the page and say I'm going to summarize it for a 3rd grader, 6th grader, 12th grader, an adult, my sibling, my parents, find ways that I could communicate it for different age groups and different word counts. And I just started practicing it. I wasn't employed to do it yet, but that's what I wanted to start doing so that I could prove when I started looking for work that this is what I could do, but it's also what I was passionate to do. Yeah.
So can we start it right now that everybody goes, whenever you do a talk from now on, everybody's like, Beth. So we got to do that. So we got to get that going. That's got to be the new thing. So, now you have a job. You know, I absolutely love my job. Let me preface this. I adore what I get to do, but you've got a job that many of us in like social media communications are very jealous of. Public information.
I'm very fortunate. Very
for Hubble. Yeah, for Hubble. And so before we dive into what your job is there, let's determine the differences, because there is Hubble ESA and there's Hubble NASA. And even I'm not clear on the differences there, and I share Hubble stuff all the time.
Absolutely. So the Hubble Space Telescope mission is a joint cooperative mission between NASA and the European Space Agency. So ESA has been involved since the very beginning, the mid-70s, when the project was conceived. ESA provided astronauts, one of the original instruments, solar arrays. There are ESA staff that are based, 15 of them based at the Space Telescope Science Institute in Baltimore. So ESA is very much actively involved. And when it comes to actually using the telescope, based on the Memorandum of Understanding, European astronomers are promised 15% of Hubble observing time. But their proposals have been so strong and successful that they've been averaging mid-20, well, the latest I think was 22% last year in terms of how much observing time the Europeans get. And then when it comes to publications and the data that comes out, to date, there's been over 17,000 peer-reviewed publications just on Hubble data. And for 40% right now of those publications, the first author is European. So European astronomers are doing fantastic in terms of their Hubble science, and it's my job to communicate it. I have the sincere gift, I like to say, with this job, in that I'm not communicating what the mission is. If I sit next to someone on the bus, odds are they've at least heard the word Hubble before. And within space, everyone knows about Hubble and all the pretty pictures. So I'm not communicating about the mission. I get to focus on the science behind the imagery and the science behind the data, which is quite interesting for a communicator, because you don't have to focus so much on the awareness as much as you can focusing on the science that it's delivering. So my job is to produce the press releases, the pictures, the announcements, all the outreach initiatives, to coordinate all of these things representing the European community for the European Space Agency. Hubble's a special mission, so it has a special contract, lots of resources to really showcase all of the data. I mean, we're putting out an average of 20 press releases a year. This includes both science and photos. a new photo every Monday is put out that's never been seen before. So there's a lot of Hubble things that need to be coordinated. So we have a dedicated team just for Hubble things. But my job is to primarily showcase the European work. But that doesn't mean I won't showcase really big stories that are coming from NASA as well. And I'm talking to them every day, and sometimes we'll do our own version of their releases, but my job is to prioritize the European side.
And I know I've said it to you before. I always think that it's really interesting. I get press releases for startup stuff, and I'll get something and I'll read through it, and be at the end it says your name. I'm like, 1 degree of separation. Like, I know her.
Right. No, it's been a sincere to have this job. I've had it now since February of last year. And it's been nothing but a pleasure ever since, and I don't plan on going anywhere. I want to continue with it for as long as I can. It's been a lot of fun so far.
Sounds like me with Space Foundation. Just like, I'm so lucky to have the job that I get to have. I get to talk to amazing people like yourself about huge things like what you can see right here behind me, which is the photo that you all released last week, video, press releases. And let's also go back to something you mentioned earlier, is that ESA is really, really big about putting things out in multiple languages. And I love that all the different Hubble presentations came out in different languages. So there was one in English, Spanish. I think the first one was Italian, and it went through all those. And I loved that. I love seeing that we're doing this more and more, and seeing more communicators that are doing bilingual and trying to get it out to more and more places. And I absolutely love that. So big week for you all last week. Tell us a little bit about it, because I know it was a whirlwind for you. So tell us a little bit about this, getting this out there.
Yeah, so every year Hubble dedicates a part of its observing time, which of course is very precious. Everyone wants Hubble time. Usually 1 in 6 of the proposals are accepted. And that proposal time is just, we have a dedicated time every year just to taking a new anniversary image. I mean, some of the most famous Hubble images are the anniversary images, because they're all particularly quite beautiful. And they usually show things that objects we have seen before, even haven't. Sometimes they're updated versions of old observations, but they're always quite colorful. I think that's something they have in common. And this year, fittingly, we have 2 nebulas that are featured there in the picture, and one of them is NGC 2020, which fits, of course, because of the year that we're in. But the 2 nebulas you're looking at are NGC 2020 and 2014. And this is a satellite galaxy to the Milky Way called the Large Magellanic Cloud. It's about 160,000 light years away. Quite beautiful, to say the least. We've called it, I think the nickname we've given is the Cosmic Reef, because it looks a bit undersea-like. And the top red nebula, we've been calling it brain coral because of the, I guess, the structure that it shows there. So the stars that we're looking at are about 15 times bigger than our sun on average. The big red one that we see that takes up most of the image, they were formed by a cluster of stars, while as the big blue ball down the section, the little wormhole, some people are calling it, in the corner, that was formed by one star that has brushed away all of its cocoon of gas, and within a few million years we expect that star might go supernova as well. So the 2 together, even though they look like separate objects, they're actually part of one giant star forming region. And I think it's quite beautiful. It was plastered everywhere on Friday, which was quite nice. We're all faced with some challenging and uncertain times right now, and sometimes the news can be a little bit discouraging, a little bit frightening. So hopefully we included in some people's news feeds some encouraging imagery, and everyone could celebrate what Hubble has been for them. I get emails all the time of, examples of Hubble being used for everything from wallpapers to phone cases, album covers. It's used everywhere. And I think while we were reflecting on Friday of everything Hubble's done for imagery and science, it also makes us excited for what's still coming. Hubble has no signs of slowing down, so it was really exciting to think about what's yet to come, and to also reflect on, I guess, everything that it's done since. And in science in particular, I'd like to remind people of 2 things. When Hubble was launched, the estimate for the age of the universe was 10 to 20 billion years. That was the huge age range that we had. And we also only knew of 1 planetary system. We didn't have conclusive proof for one exoplanet yet until 5 years later. So when you think about how much has changed, Hubble has really, really given a dent in the field of astronomy and arguably science in general.
I don't even know if it's arguably. I don't know.
I should just say that. I need to be so humble. That's right.
Yeah. I think I don't even know that it's even an argument anymore. And of course, I get planting that flag, but it's really so exciting to see what it's done. And I know it's meant a lot to me, especially somebody that is a curator of space and science, especially images and videos. If I'm looking for something and I can't find something for that day, I generally will be like, wonder what Hubble was up to. Let's see what's out there. What's something I haven't shared in a while? And it always gets huge traction, huge numbers. And I see that Marcy had said that she can't see the picture that's behind me. We did post it on Friday on the Space Foundation page. So if you go back just a couple days ago, you'll be able to see it. The video that came out for this, like spanning those 30 years, is incredible. And that's something really amazing to think about, is that there were so many missions to get it up there, to get it fixed, to make sure it continues to work. Yeah. It's been a really in-depth 30 years. So if you're thinking about like maybe what's in your opinion is like the biggest moment that Hubble has had so far that may like be like that one thing that everybody remembers?
I think it depends on what area of astronomy excites you most. So with regards to the expansion of the universe, it was confirmed that it's accelerating, not only growing. That resulted in the Nobel Prize based on Hubble data. And one of its core things was to also determine the age of the universe. So we now know that is because of Hubble data. And I also think that something that surprised us is that Hubble was not necessarily set out to be an exoplanet hunter, but it's become one. Hubble's able to analyze the signatures and the characteristics of the atmospheres of other planets that lie far beyond our solar system. Just November past, it found the first evidence of water vapor and a planet that was within the habitable zone. Doesn't mean it's habitable, but it's within the zone. And it was something that nobody expected, but has now been able to detect and find evidence for hundreds of exoplanets, but also characterizing them, which was something we didn't expect. I think there will also be a lot of important discoveries that will come in the coming years with James Webb. If there is overlap in terms of their science, I always emphasize that James Webb is not replacing Hubble. It's a successor that will complement it. And I think the two of them together, being able to cover a wider range on the electromagnetic spectrum, will be fantastic. Having them observe the same objects simultaneously, there's a lot of potential there. That's quite exciting.
So I got to go with my own personal nerdiness here. What is the thing that maybe people don't really know about that's really exciting about Hubble that maybe you think doesn't get enough? It's not talked about enough, or even maybe it's something that people don't know. What's that one thing that you always can't wait to tell people? Well, you might know this about Hubble, but you don't know this.
I tell everyone that its data is accessible for anyone. You can explore its imagery, its data. It's available for everyone in the archives. It's a bit technical, and the images don't look quite like we're used to seeing them because they have to be, processed, of course. But the data is freely accessible for everyone, and I think that will be something that will be hugely impactful. Even after Hubble, its mission unfortunately comes to an end, we'll still be finding science discoveries in that archive for years to come. So it's something that people may not be aware of, is that it can be accessed by anyone at any time.
And I think that's something that can also be confusing for people. Is a lot of people see these colors and they're just, they're stunning. You see, as you can see the image behind me, it's amazing. And a lot of people don't know what those colors mean. So, and does it really look like that? I'm sure you get that question all the time, right?
All the time, yeah. So we combine different filters. Hubble observes in various parts of the electromagnetic spectrum. So when you combine the different filters, it depends on whether you're observing it in infrared light or optical, which is like what we would see with our eyes if we had the capabilities to do so. But yes, what you're looking at is what's really out there. And I think that's what's so special about Hubble, is it showed us not only what's out there, but just how darn beautiful it is. It's simply stunning. And there's some great animations that we have on spacetelescope.org too that show you the same image, transitioning between optical and infrared, for example. with optical imagery, sometimes it's hard for us to see through the gas and dust that lies out there, but infrared can peer right through it. So sometimes we combine those so that we can get a really full picture, not only of what we're looking at, but what's in it. So that's why we have to use different filters to look at the same objects, but they really are that beautiful. And the corrections and the processing of those images is very delicate work. The best of the best in the world are working on the Hubble images, both in Europe and the US. So it's quite special to see when they're finished. When I get the new images to be putting out each week, it's quite something to reflect on them.
And great comment here by Sean Case from Enterprise in Space, one of mankind's greatest tools, and sincerely has changed all of humankind, I think, in the best way possible. And I love that it's something that we continually get to utilize and share. And this is something that you actually got on stage to talk about. You did a TEDx talk on that. Well, first, is that the only TEDx talk you've done? Was the one on Hubble? Have you done others?
Yeah, good question. I was lined up to do several this year, but of course we've had a wrench thrown in things. That was the first there last year, and it was my pitch for it was based on talking about the impact of Hubble, but from a more cultural and personal stance. I emphasized some of Hubble's biggest impacts with regards to imagery and science, but I really wanted people to take a step back and think of what it can mean for you personally. And people say it makes them feel small, but I really don't want people to use that term. I want you to instead think of how beautiful it is that you get to be part of and to observe something like that. The fact that we can see it. I want people to reflect on how important that is, even for forming an identity as a human species. I think Hubble can answer some things that are a lot more philosophical than, we might think of on a very top level. So I try to dive into that a little bit with that talk, because I give so many talks just about what we're looking at in the images or what Hubble's biggest science contributions are. So I really wanted to think a little deeper and even outside my comfort zone, because I think Hubble has contributions a little outside of what we might expect or think of.
And I think, that's a great point that you make. I think there's so many people that struggle a lot with, especially now with, what's the meaning of everything? Who am I? And, so many of us have imposter syndrome and a lot of these issues but if you look at some of these Hubble images, and, we all know that the term that's been out there since Carl Sagan, we are made of star stuff. To look out and see like the beauty that you come from, like that's led humanity to this point that we're allowed to sit and think about all these incredible things about the universe, that we are the chance for the universe to know itself. And Hubble has been massive for that, just the biggest thing ever.
Yeah, I love that you use that quote, because the fact that we are made of stuff and stardust, we're now seeing what that stuff is. We never knew what it was we were made out of. We could never visualize it before. This is, it's because of Hubble imagery that we can see it. And I think that has, very profound meaning that we'll be speaking of, for generations. So I've had several different jobs in outreach and communications, but this one's been quite special, for several reasons.
And, this is something we're going to get to a little bit later anyway, but there's a couple different websites that people can check out. So this is from Astromedics. He wants to know, where do you recommend to go to see Hubble's imagery? And that's your wheelhouse.
Absolutely. So I definitely suggest checking out spacetoLescope.org. That is the ESA website, but it's also one where we're putting out the new picture of the week, which is always an image that people have not seen before. We try to prioritize objects that have also not been imaged before. So these are usually the ones that are used on Wikipedia, the ones that we put out on the Monday Picture of the Week series. And there will be new releases coming out very soon. New Hubble science and new Hubble imagery that are changing the game. But the vast image and video archive, you could spend weeks upon months looking through what's on that website. The NASA equivalent is Hubble site. So there's Space Telescope and Hubble site are the two websites to take a look through. Of course, I'm going to encourage spacetoLescope.org, but anywhere you look, you'll find Hubble imagery. If you actually want to look through the archive, the Hubble Legacy Archive is what I suggest if you want to look through more specifically. But it's a never-ending trove of treasures that you can find in there. And one of the Hubble 30th anniversary initiatives we tried this year was to make a commemorative calendar, which was very popular, and anyone can go download it. It's available on spacetoLescope.org as well. And we did a contest in the fall, I think it was October and November of last year, where we featured 30 to 50 of the images from the Hubble archive, or the vast thousands of images that we've put out that are not so popular. Maybe they haven't got as much attention as the anniversary image, but they're arguably still beautiful. So we put them out and we said the images that get the most likes, comments, shares, we're going to put them into a calendar. They called it the Hidden Gems calendar for 2020. So if anyone wants to download, have printed, it's available on spacetelescope.org as well. And you'll realize that they can be categorized according to the different types of objects that you want to look at, or get in touch with me anytime. I mean, I'm always happy to answer Hubble-related questions.
And so we do actually have a couple more questions that we're to touch on here, but I have one in particular from a fellow Canadian possum knot. Shauna, we were doing our interview, and whenever we finished up, I told her that I was going to be talking to you in a few weeks, and she said, you have to ask her about her skills when it comes to the organization. She's like, I've never seen anybody else like it before. And that comes from the surgeon, kickboxer, multi-term speaker.
What is a massive compliment.
like that's what I think. I'm like, well, if you say it, then we've got to ask that question. So apparently you're pretty good with your organizational skills. So maybe that's something that people, especially right now, might need some help with.
I think part of it is time management. 2019 was my busiest year so far. I had just over 100 flights throughout the course of the year. Was still working full-time, almost 2 full-time jobs. So in addition to the Hubble work, I was part of the International Astronomical Union, and they were celebrating their 100th anniversary last year, and I was part of the Secretariat and in charge of coordinating 4 of their global projects. And these are the ones that really taught me time management. I'll mention briefly what the projects were. The first one was the 100 Hours of Astronomy, and we coordinated 1,200 simultaneous outreach astronomy projects in 86 countries. And then we did a global effort for the moon landing anniversary in July last year. And then I organized one that focused on engaging kids with the use of communicators and teachers. So I had scientists, communicators, and teachers going to school in their communities to talk about astronomy. We had a variety of resources available for them. And we had over 110,000 kids participate in that one. And then most recently, we did the 30th anniversary of the pale blue dot image. And we celebrated that anniversary by organizing in 52 countries. We had outreach astronomy projects that talked about the role of astronomy for global citizenship. So these were global projects that I had to coordinate, on an arguably large scale throughout the year, periodically. And even though I was still having to travel for work and still doing the Hubble work all at the same time, one thing that came down that I realized I had to have was time management, because if I didn't do something, it didn't happen, then I was screwed. It had to happen. Number one thing is I became very effective and a worker at airports. If I was spending half my time there, I had to make the most of the time. But I also learned how to shut things down. For example, I never bought internet on a plane. Being on a plane in the sky, that was my downtime. That was my me time. And if I took vacation for a weekend, I truly took vacation for a weekend, didn't check anything unless I knew there was going to be something urgent. I work on to-do lists. When people ask me how to stay organized, I essentially base my life around to-do lists. Because I have several jobs, I mean, I in addition now to being Hubble almost full-time, I'm still working with UNESCO on their International Day of Light. I'm still finishing up some things from that IAU 100 project last year. Looking at some other opportunities. So there's always a bunch of things being thrown around. And I think many of us that work in outreach, we never just have one job. I think there's several things that we're involved in. A new one that I took on was managing the website spacescoop.org, in which we publish articles for children based on astronomy news releases. And where you're involved with so many people, I think it's a matter of not only being organized professionally, using to-do lists, using spreadsheets, but being organized personally. I usually take 2-3 walks a day. If I'm really feeling good, I'll take a run. It means that working on to-do lists, but I put a little number on that to-do list. 1 means priority 1, got to do that before I do any number 2s. Then number 2s get done before number 3s. So it's a system that I work out for myself that took some finessing. I mean, I'm still working on it. there are still days where I spend more time enjoying Netflix, I think, than I should, but there really has to be some balance in terms of enjoying your downtime, but working hard in the time when you are. And I consider myself a decently efficient worker, but I think that's because I love the work. If I didn't love everything that I was doing, I don't think I'd be getting it done as efficiently as I am. So it takes time. Shauna is just as bad in terms of how many things that she's involved in, and she is just as organized. I think I share her love of spreadsheets. I think that helps us both a lot. But it takes time. I'm still young yet, so I'm still trying to find that perfect balance of, work and personal life. But I think, like I said, it's a challenge because I love the work so much.
Well, I think that you, all the amazing work that you do, it's okay to kind of binge on some Netflix here and there. And who doesn't need Commander Riker stepping over chair awkwardly to sit down? I've still never understood why he did that. I hope to ask him someday. Like, why does he do that? I guess he's like 6'6" or something. He's huge. But so as we get into really like the last question here, it's, you've given a lot of great insight into what you do and advice. But if there isn't any advice for people that want to do what you do, communications, getting the word out about all the amazing things that are going on, this is something that I believe is not overlooked, but definitely underappreciated, because if it's not for you, we don't get to understand the universe in a way that is, because you read the science can be really difficult to understand. And science communication is a very powerful thing that you have certainly mastered at a young age already. So can you give anybody advice that wants to follow in your footsteps to do what you do?
So the first thing is start practicing it like I did. When I wasn't even employed to do it, I just started doing it, because it does take a lot of work finding creative ways to explain something that's technical. One of my biggest pet peeves is the term rocket science. I think that can deter people from working and pursuing an amazing discipline, a great domain. And rocket science is only that way in your mindset. It's only hard if you put it in your head that it's impossible to understand, impossible to work on. So I really discourage people from using that term, because I think that part of the reason is that we don't effectively communicate how important the science and the technology in the aerospace industry is, but also how relevant it is. I also encourage people to read up on the literature. If you're going to communicate space, then you got to know your space stuff too. From technology to the science to the news that's happening, what new contracts have been won, what's the next timeline for the Artemis missions, constantly being up to date on the information that you want to communicate. Because people will go to you for questions, and that's important, to feel that you can be accessible to those that are interested not only in your story, but the information that you're communicating. You want it to be accessible so that people can come to you with the questions, but it's important that you know the right answers to the questions too, but also feel comfortable saying if you don't know. And I think maybe arguably the most important is the mindset that you go into it. It can be a very heck type of job, and I encourage people to develop a healthy mindset of positivity, because it can be a bit overwhelming at times. And part of the ways that can help towards that is having a strong community of those who are doing the same thing around you, but also mentorship. When I had some really, really great bosses at ESA, both through my internship and now. And I think the fact that they are women who are trailblazed in their respective disciplines in astronomy in general has been really encouraging. Being able to learn from them and work with them is the reason that I've gained confidence to be doing what I'm doing. But also you can have mentors that you don't necessarily talk to directly. I always looked up to previous Canadian astronaut and now our Governor General for Canada, Julie Payette. Looked up to her always as a kid, and when she was in town last year, she invited me to lunch, and then I was honored to be awarded the Sovereign's Medal from her last year. So I've actually come to know her and have a relationship with her. But I looked up to her for several years before even, having a dialogue to any degree. So I think it's important to even have people that you can keep looking up to, and hopefully one day they become accessible for you. And I think with technology now, social media, our mentors can be closer, and more accessible than ever. So have several of them, those that are within your community, those that are within your domain, and also those that are at the top of your field. It's important to have several to strive towards and to do what they're doing. So I think I've answered your question with 10,000 different points, but I think it's a well-rounded balance for that, I think. But I hope that anyone that finds a love for this or wants to get in touch anytime knows that they can reach out to me in many different ways, whether it's on social media, online. I'm happy to chat.
I can only echo everything you said. The people that I used to watch and learn from as science communicators, now I get to do interviews with them, and even more so, get to do stuff, really cool stuff like Space Symposium and all the events and stuff that I get to go to. And it's really big. Another point that I definitely want to put another extra big check mark beside is that make sure it's right. For instance, last night I got a phone call from a friend of mine. We've been friends for 15 years, musician, amazing guy. And once we got on the phone, all of a sudden, all the science questions came. Like, we haven't really talked, and it went from a catch up to an hour phone call. And this happens a couple times a week to me. And if you don't have the right information, because he's like, dude, I didn't know that SpaceX has launched and landed over 50 rockets. You don't see that in the regular news. He's like, and I listen to NPR. I try to listen to like balanced news sources. I still don't know that. And it's really important that we have people like you out there. And to the last point of your social media stuff, this isn't something you just do as a job. You also do it on your own personal social media. You put it in stories on Instagram. So let everybody know where they can find you on social media as well as your website.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm on Twitter. I'm actively engaged, primarily sharing updates from the Space Scoop program, as well as Hubble News, also personal things while I'm traveling. Instagram was the one that really took off, which surprised me. A lot of people have tried to use it for a science communication tool, and I struggled with that at the beginning. I didn't know how to balance personal and outreach on a professional sense on that platform. So I decided to use the stories feature. And every day I'd pick a topic and I try to explain it, whether it's something that's come out in the news or new paper I've read. I try to explain it in simple language in a way that you have. If I tell myself, if I have 30 seconds of your attention a day, not even that, 15, 20 seconds of your attention, I want you to learn something. But I want you to be able to learn it, quickly as you're flicking through your timeline, so that you take something away that was a little educative. And I'm delighted to use Instagram for that. So Bethany Downer for Instagram, or Bethany Astro for Twitter. My personal website is being revamped. It will be bethanydowner.com or .org shortly, once all the Hubble things have died down and I can spend some time on that. That will be back up again. But I appreciate everyone that's been following everything so far. It's been nothing but exciting and fantastic.
Well, you've been an amazing guest today. Thank you for your insights. I learned a lot, even as somebody that is somewhere in the same field as you are, not as high on that list with the amazing things you get to do. So I really love it. Thank you so much for all that you share, and we appreciate you coming on today, especially so soon after everything with your very busy schedule. We appreciate you, Bethany.
No, thank you very much. I enjoyed it, and get in touch anytime.
Awesome. And everybody, that's going to conclude this episode of the live edition of Space Foundation's Space4U podcast. Keep your eyes and ears open for more Space4U episodes by checking out our social media outlets on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And of course, our website at www.spacefoundation.org. And also don't forget about our current education project with Auxilia, which has all kinds of amazing resources for you in this downtime or uptime, depending on who you are. So that way you can educate yourself and your children on all the amazing things that are going on in space, and learn some space and science in a really fun way. And on all these outlets and more, it is our goal to inspire, educate, connect, and advocate for the space community. Because of the Space Foundation, we will always have space for you. Thank you so much for joining today.